Tonight I'm going to demonstrate how to use a new silkscreen material to make labels, logos, and even dial glass plates without the expense of buying those expensive silkscreen kits you can get from art supply stores. This silkscreen comes in 2 resolutions and is already pre-sensitized so that it makes it very easy to use. So I'll demonstrate the process later. Right now I want to look at a couple of units that I've relabeled using this process. They are an R11 and R15 sets, and these have been re-silk screened using the process I'm going to describe tonight.
Here you see the R11 and R15. Obviously the panel painting has chipped away, taking the panel markings with it, as is the case in so many of these sets. So I repainted the panel and then used the silk screening process to redo all of the markings. And here is the finished result. I know the resolution isn't good enough on the screen to show it well, but it turned out very well indeed, in my opinion. Here is the radio with the broken dial plate. You see there's a whole section missing out of it, and that's what I'm going to replace by redoing the whole dial with silk screen and red ink. So this will be the process I'm going to describe in the following video. And here's a close-up of the broken section, just to show that there's a gap of about 7/16 of an inch that I'll have to be very careful to retain when I'm making the silk screen, so that it accommodates the opening in the radio and also the band spread of the dial, of course.
Well, the first thing to do is to scan the broken glass, making sure I've got the correct distance between these 2 broken edges. So I'll use my scanner here for that purpose as a white background, and then I'll show what the scan looks like and how I might have to slightly adjust the scanned image for brightness and resolution, that sort of thing. Here I have my scanner. I'm going to put the glass on the scanner, face down of course, and make sure I have that measurement correct at the broken edge. Otherwise my pattern that I make before silk screening will of course be incorrect, dimensionally at least. So I will check this on the correct scale. That appears to be correct, so I'm going to do 1 scan using what is called the hewlett-packard printer scanning program. This is probably not very visible on the screen, but still I'm using the scan picture function here, and I should soon get a scan of my broken glass. Then I'll show it on the screen.
Here you see the scan of the glass dial plate with the gap in there and measured at 7/16 inch, as I mentioned before. You'll see that this is a fairly narrow piece of glass, so I'm going to do it all in 1 silk screen. Sometimes I do it in multiple pieces, because then if you make a mistake in one, it's not do the whole thing over, just part of it. But in this case, the whole thing is only about 1 inch high, so that should be very convenient.
Well, now that I have the scanned image of the broken dial glass in my computer, I'm going to use a program called GIMP, which is an acronym for Graphic Image Manipulation Program. The reason I use it, other than the fact it's very user-friendly, is that it allows the use of layers. So what I'll do is bring up the image as 1 layer, add a new layer on top of it, where I can add the dial markings after I've found a font that's suitable to match the original printing on the dial. There are many programs that have this kind of layering action. Photo Paint is one of them, and there are many others as well, I'm sure. Anyway, that's what I'm going to do now, and I will show it by means of a screen video capture program. Well, after trying about 6 different screen video capture programs, and none of which will work with Windows Movie Maker, I'm reverting to the business of taking a video of the screen of my computer, which of course is not ideal, to say the least. Anyway, I have looked through the type fonts that come with Windows Word and comparing them to what I have up here on the glass. Particularly if you look at the 5, there's a little downward stroke at the end of the upward part of the 5. So if you look at all of these, it looks like maybe Latinx CNBT is the one that might work. So if we expand it a bit, that will be easier to see. So I'm going to put it up to maybe, let's say, 28, maybe. See how that works. And there we have it. So if I bring it up to the top, and then I should be able to see if this is going to be the one we're going to use. So you see there, pardon me, that the 5 is fairly close. I think that might work. The spacing of the numerals is a bit larger than I would like. So this is the kind of experimentation that will be required in any event to find the proper font to use on the glass. Another consideration when doing these screens is that the letters have to be of a certain thickness in order to reproduce well in the silk screen, because it has a certain resolution in the weave as well. So here I've taken, instead of the Latinx NBT, which was too widely spaced, the Aurora CNBT, and brought it up to the top and magnified the letters to about the same size as those on the dial. So you'll see that the spacing of the letters is in fact, or I should say the spacing of the numbers, is in fact better in this case, and even though it's a bit too bold, it's probably going to achieve better success when I actually make the silk screen and expose the negative to the light. So I think that's what the one I will use just for purposes of demonstration of this process in any event. Now that I've got the type font selected for the numerals, I do the same thing for that sort of cursive writing that shows the standard broadcast logo on the underside of the dial. So that will complete that part of the process. Now I'm going to demonstrate how to use GIMP and the layers to generate a new dial glass. Unfortunately, I'll have to use this rather poor process again of training my camera on my computer screen. Less than desirable, but it's the easy way at the moment. Well, here I have GIMP up on my screen with the scan of the glass dial plate. And I'm now going to add a layer. And you go up, I know this is not sufficiently high resolution to be able to see this. I'm going to add a new layer, and that's the same size as the other one. And it's now on top of the scanned area. Now I've already selected, I hope, my Aurora CNBT condensed type font for the numbers. So I'm going to show you how that works here. It'll be black because I'm going to screen print in red, not do red for the negative. So I'll set up a place here for putting maybe the 55 in. You see it there. Might be a bit too large, but this is just a demonstration. Bring it up over the 55. And you see it's pretty close to what it should be. So I'm going to space that over a bit, if I can. Maybe I'll do another one over here just to show you. I'll do the 110. And you see that it's condensed pretty well, just like the other one is. And there you see the 110. Now, there you are. And you see what I could do once I've finished with that is I can show you that this top layer, hopefully, will be able to be moved away from the layer underneath. Now I'll do that up here. You see what I have now is a new layer with nothing but what I've just printed on the screen. Now I'll use something like the line drawing program here to draw the line Now I've selected here, among all the different sizes of lines I could have, the one that I think is perhaps closest to the ones on the dial. So I'll demonstrate that as well. And I put the end point there, drag it over, and there, so I have the black line as required. In the negative, I should say. These will obviously print red when I get the appropriate ink on the silk screen. So this demonstrates how GIMP works with layers. I will not bore you with the whole process, but I'll now go ahead and do the whole dial plate and show you the end result before I make the negative on my printer using a transparency film.
Well, here you see the dial markings finally reproduced as they will look on a transparency. And this is on a white background, and I can now print this on an inkjet transparency film. However, for reasons I'll explain later, I decided I had to separate out all of the dial markings as shown here. So there are 6 different markings for which I'll be making small silk screens. This is not a bad thing, because if you do make a mistake in screening one of the markings, you don't have to rub out everything in order to just correct that one.
Well, I have now prepared the drawing for all of the separate screens I'm going to have to make, and I've printed them on inkjet transparency film, which looks like that, although I realize on this resolution of this camera you can't really see it very well, but still there it is. I will now cut these up into these 6 different sections and prepare 6 different little screens for each one of them. Now, one thing I've noticed is getting harder and harder to get this transparency film, I guess because very few people are now using overhead projectors. So at Staples, for example, they want to sell you a box of 50 for $51, where you used to be able to get a dozen for a heck of a lot less than that. But still, the other thing you can do is, as Easy Screen Print recommends, is go to a printer and get them to print your transparencies with a laser printer. But I have found that using your printer set to the best quality setting, the density of the print on the transparency is perfectly adequate for making these particular screens. So what I'll now do is, as I said, chop these up, expose the little screens and show you how that works before squeegeeing onto a new piece of glass. And now a few words about Easy Screen Print. You order them from a place called Easy Screen Print, 3640 Crane Place, Casa Grande, Arizona. I get these in Florida because, of course, the shipping is so much cheaper there. But I think I've seen similar material at not at Staples, but rather at Michael's craft store here in Ottawa, although I don't know how it works compared to this stuff. Comes in 8.5 by 11 sheets in these black light-proof packages, or also I think it's 7 by 5. And one thing I have found in this particular project is, of course, my glass dial is bigger than the biggest sheet that these people provide. This is not something you'd ordinarily run into, I think, but that's why I'm chopping these transparencies up into small bits so I can do them individually on a piece of glass. And that has its advantages too, because if you make a mistake with one particular print, you can rub it off and start again rather than spoiling the whole thing. So what you do with this stuff is you expose it for 1 minute in bright sunlight with your transparency held firmly on top by paper clips or other means. Then you wash it in water, running water, for about 5 minutes, and use a soft brush to make sure all of the material is out of the unexposed section. Then you let it dry for half an hour or so, and you're all ready to print with a squeegee and an ink of a certain consistency. Now, I'll get to the question of ink later on in the process. Well, here I am in my basement, lit by the red light of my old Milwaukee beer sign. You don't really need a red light, although it's preferable. You can use very, very subdued ordinary lighting, as long as it's not fluorescent. It can be incandescent. So I have here one of my transparencies that I cut out of the master sheet. And I get here a sheet of this pre-sensitized screen material. And I'm going to cut a piece that fits the transparency that I have for the moment. Just like so. then you have to remove this protective backing, if I can get it. And once that, and then as well as that, I have my sink full of water in the bathroom ready for the rinsing after I've exposed the film. So you put the emulsion side down on the transparency with the transparency face side up, center it under the printed area, and I have this on the cover of a black book to avoid retransmission of light through the transparency, which might ruin the resolution of the resulting screen. So this looks reasonably good. Let me just make sure it's square. It happens to be a sunny day out there today, so I'm going to expose this and do the rinsing, and you can see how the thing turns out. So I've now got this ready. I'm going to go upstairs into the sunshine, expose it for 1 minute, and rapidly get it into the sink to start the washing for 15 minutes. After that, you run it in running water for about a minute just to make sure all of the or I should say non-exposed area is washed away, because that's where you're going to be able to print through with ink or paint. So here goes. We'll see how this works. One thing I should also mention is that you need to have some clear, really transparent piece of glass or plastic on top of this to press it down firmly while you're exposing it, so that no light creeps under the black parts of your transparency. So here I have a cover of a CD, but a sheet of glass would probably be better. I just don't happen to have that at the moment. But in any event, they need this pressure on the sandwich of the transparency and the silkscreen film. So with that done, now I can go and expose it.
Here I am on a bright sunny day, exposing the whole sandwich of black book, transparency, screen film, and transparent cover to the perpendicular rays of the sun. Now I can start the washing process.
Well, you can already see here how the printing has come out on the unexposed parts of the film. It needs a little bit of rinsing under running water, lukewarm running water I should say, and just sort of brush it a bit to make sure all of the unexposed parts are washed away. And that turns out pretty good. It has good resolution and good contrast between the unexposed parts and the exposed parts. So that's the silk screen for the dial number markings. And I can now proceed with the other 5 silk screens that I have to make.
And here are the 6 screens, all properly dried and ready for silk screening. I should have mentioned that one of the things you have to do after washing these and drying them is expose them to the light again for a little while, just to harden the exposed areas of the film.
Here I have my 2 pieces of glass cut for the new dial. They have been washed liberally in detergent and rinsed in hot water and dried with a clean white cloth. Now I've marked some of the important points on the dial where I'm going to have to place my silk screen, and I can see through the silk screen to see where to position it to get it the same as the original dial, which is of course this one. So now I will tape my glass plate to this piece of paper and the board, and tape one end of the silk screen and proceed from there. Now for my squeegee, I'm just using a standard kitchen squeegee made out of silicone rubber. Got a reasonably flat edge, but it's also flexible. I'm going to make about 3 passes with the ink to make sure all the holes are filled. With respect to the ink, it's always said with silk screening you should use ink that's about the consistency of butter at room temperature. That's so it goes through the holes in the silk screen but doesn't spread underneath. So I'm using red acrylic paint, which I know will stick to glass, and it's about the right consistency as well. And I've also got over here a jug of water into which I will plunge the silkscreen after I've made the first pass, just to make sure that it's usable in case I mess this one up, because I don't want the acrylic paint hardening into my silkscreen or have to make another one. The other thing is, because we're screening onto the back of the glass, everything has to be done in reverse, so I turn my silkscreen upside down to do the silk screening. And I've, as I said before, used these various lines drawn on the paper to guide me as to where it should be. Now I'll put some blobs of ink about here, here, and here maybe, and proceed to silk screen and see how it goes. Okay, now I have my ink applied and I'm ready to do my 3 passes with the spatula, hopefully without moving the silk screen so I don't smear it. So there's 1. You can see why I need that, because I haven't done the 0 on the 160. 2 and 3. I'll lift this up very gently, putting my spatula in the water, and see how it worked out. So hopefully you can see in this video the result of the first pass of my silk screening. So now it's going to get more difficult as time goes on, because if I make a mistake in another one, it's going to be very difficult to get it off. But still, that's the way I'll proceed. And then in the end, there's that bit of gold paint has to go on with the blank bit in the middle for the dots representing the numbers on the dial. So that's how I'll proceed now. Here's hoping no more mistakes. Here you see the results of that first printing. Detail looks pretty good, well-defined numerals. So that's a success. Now I'll start on the smaller script like broadcast and kilocycles. Here I am ready to do the next silk screening. In this case it's the kilocycles legend, and I've let the previous printing dry for about a day just to make sure it's good and dry before I risk putting another silk screen on top of it. And similarly, when I've got this one printed, I will wait maybe another day, and that's 6 days in total for doing it this way by individual little screens. If I had had a large enough piece of silk screening material, I could have all done it in one swipe, of course. So here goes. I've got my blobs of ink on the screen, and I'll do the usual 3 swipes at least. 1, 2, 3, maybe 4. Let's see how that worked out. And there I have what is actually another perfect silk screening. See if I can zoom up on this. You see I've got the kilocycles legend there. So I'll dump my silk screen into the water to get the ink dissolved again, just in case. And now I'll have to let that dry, as I say, for about a day, and go from there with the others. Let me see, 4 screens that I have to use for this particular dial plate. Well, I'm now ready to do the second of the cursive script logos on the dial. I have my screen print film there, and I'll do my 4 swipes with the spatula as usual. That was more than 4, but I just wanted to make sure. Let's see how that turned out. Looks pretty good, actually. So that's another good print. Get the silk screen into the water so I can wash it off just in case. And my spatula too. So I have one more to do over on this side of the dial, then I can do these surrounds that you see there. I'm almost finished now with this process. I'm now doing this, what I call surround line, which is a little trickier, but still, here goes. It'll be a question, did I get enough ink on it? But let's see. Yes, I did. It's a bit thin in spots, but I think it'll be okay. So here you see the finished dial plate except for the gold paint.
You can see everything turned out quite sharp and good contrast. So now all I have to do is mask the area where the dots are and apply the gold paint to the rear, and that'll be it finished. So I'll show you the result in a minute. So here you see I've masked off the clear area where there's to be no paint and put gold paint on the rear of the dial glass over the silk screening. So that really completes the production of this replacement dial glass. Reasonably successfully too, I have to say, and most of the credit for that goes to the easy screen print material.
And finally, here you see the new dial glass inserted into the old radio cabinet, which I've not yet refinished and might not, depending on time available, since it's not a valuable radio in any case, although it might fix the electronics. So now you can see the finished product.
So there you have the process in a few easy steps. First of all, make a new image of the dial plate or of the decal that you're going to reproduce. Make a transparency of it. Expose the easy screen print material. Wash it and dry it, and then do your screen printing. It's quite foolproof, and I've done it several times now. So I hope this has been somewhat helpful and interesting too.